So I want to talk about identity, identifying as a medical doctor, physician, or whatever career it is that you identify with. This could be the same said for if you're a lawyer and you identify as that. It also could apply to if you're a mom, whatever it is that you really identify with. But also the idea that I've kind of termed achievement buffers and really hiding behind your achievements and successes because you feel like that's the most interesting thing about you. And I feel like that's kind of the interesting thing about identity is so many of us spend so long developing our academic success or our career success, and we become so kind of honed in on whatever that identity is. And I'm talking specifically about physicians because that's what my background is. That's what I know. So you spend so long going through pre-med, medical school, residency, whatever, to become a doctor. And when people ask you who you are, what you are, that's who you are. I'm a doctor. And you let that define you. And I think that that's kind of one of the most dangerous things that I've seen coming up again and again in terms of people reaching out to me and saying, I want to leave medicine, but I don't know what I can do. This is what's defined me for so long. I don't know what other skills I have. I don't know what else. I don't know what else I would do outside of medicine. It's almost like this is the only thing that encompasses who they are. And I've also seen it in social media groups, the same sort of revolving conversation of physicians retiring, not knowing what to do with themselves, just kind of being workaholics their whole lives. And the same sort of core piece sort of transcending throughout all of this is the piece of identity. And the reason it really catches my attention is because I think it starts early. When you look at pre-health profession students, pre-med students or whatever, they identify pretty early as I'm a pre-med. And I think you get a lot of social feedback based on that. Of, oh, you're pre-med, you're going to go to med school. And then, oh, you're in med school, congratulations. And I think you start to get this positive praise and acceptance and social, I don't know what you want to call it. Basically social acceptance of your path pretty early on, at least from medicine, because I think it's seen as a good career, as a noble career, as people are impressed by it in some way. And so I think people latch onto that identity pretty strongly relatively early in their career. And I would suspect it's probably the same for other things. You could apply it to, prestigious business schools, getting your MBA or law school or whatever it is. But I think that the harm in that is when you sort of lock into that as being the kind of the soul thing or the core thing that really defines you. And I mean, part of that is true. You spend a lot of your core time developing those skills, spending time learning, educating, really working to become that specific thing, to become a physician, for example. And so, when people say, well, what are you outside of a physician? What hobbies do you have? Whatever. I always see people that are, balk at that. They're like, what do you mean? What hobbies? Like, what time do I have outside of medicine to develop myself and my hobbies and all of these other things? But I think that that's really the danger in sort of locking yourself into this idea that I am only a physician and I'm only a physician forever. And my life outside of that is really just trying to maintain personal relationships and whatever. But that is the core of who I am. Because I think if that is ever stripped from you, or if, in my case, if you choose to leave, it's really hard to get a sense of who you are. Then you go sort of searching through this identity piece and you lose who you are because you're like, I've only ever been a physician or been training to be a physician. And I don't know who I am outside of this or outside of these academic achievements or this success. And so that's when people tend to really struggle. And that's the questions that I get a lot from people saying, I don't know who I am outside of the medical system, the medical world, this life that I've created in terms of training. And I think that it's important to develop a rich inner life, a rich world outside of medicine. And I think the most unfortunate thing about really demanding careers like medicine, like other things like law school or whatever, is that it is pretty time consuming. And so when people say, you need to develop other hobbies and relationships and whatever, it does become harder. But I think when you, for example, like if you go on dating websites and you list that, and I've seen this, and I've seen real life examples of this, that so-and-so lists that they're a doctor and lists, a couple other like kind of high achieving things, that they graduated from such and such and this and this, and they're all very achievement success oriented things. That doesn't tell me a lot about who they are as a person, other than that they're very driven, but it doesn't tell me a lot about their hobbies. It doesn't tell me a lot about other things they value in their life. It tells me that probably they're a compassionate person, but that's what I kind of mean by these achievement buffers that people hide behind. And I feel like I did that for a lot of my life. When people asked what I did or who I was, I'm a physician. And that is immediately a conversation starter, and people want to know more about your life or whatever. But it was never, I intentionally try to stray away from that now as the starting point of a conversation. Of course, if people get to know me, that's a part of my story. That's a huge part of my life in terms of the time I spend in training, and what I do now. But I have, so many interests outside of that. I am a complete person outside of that. There's other things that I like to do outside of medicine. And I think it's important that if you haven't figured out what those are, that you take time to try to develop and figure out what they are. Do you like hiking? Do you like painting? Do you like traveling? Are you really into music? What is it that is important to you, outside of your medical career? Because if that is ever sort of pulled away from you, or if you go the whole way throughout medicine and you get to a point where, you happily retire, what are you going to do with your time? How do you want to spend your time besides seeing patients? Because although that's a great and valuable way to spend your time, I think it's really important to understand who you are at your core, and what you really value and what you like to spend your time doing and what brings you joy besides just your career. And that doesn't just apply to medicine. That applies to really, I think everyone should do that. But I think it's particularly important for health professions, people that work in the health professions, because you spend so much of your time giving of yourself to others. You're sort of in a service industry. You're spending a lot of time around people, a lot of things that are demanding your attention. And so I think if you know before going in, sort of what fills your cup, what's important to you, what you value, what hobbies or things sort of bring you peace, reduce your stress, that kind of stuff, I think it's so valuable in terms of moving you forward, and really not just latching on to this, I'm a physician and that's all I am. Are you a sister? Are you a mother? Are you an artist? Are you a skateboarder? Are you, what are the other things in your life that make you, an interesting and complete and human being? And that's really what I'm trying to get at when I try to sort of encourage physicians to separate from their identity. It's not that that's not who they are. It's a huge part of your life. It's a huge amount of time commitment, financial resources, all of these different things that you invest. But I think when you get so locked into it being the only thing about you or the most interesting thing about you, to me, that's when you become so saturated in the system, so saturated in losing yourself within the system that I personally think you're more prone to burnout when you have nothing else that you can go home and say, this is really important to me. This sustains me. If medicine fell away tomorrow, I could be happy doing this. I know that I have value in these types of skills or this type of talent. And medicine is not the only thing that's important in my life. And I think it's important to know that, because I think the more tightly you grasp on to medicine being the only and most interesting thing about you, the more trapped and locked into you feel to that career. And that's just my experience of what I've seen talking to people about it, and the conversations I've seen revolving around it. The more people are, the more detached people are from their career in medicine. Of, it's great, I love it, I love interacting with people, but if I left it tomorrow, I would be fine. I think that's a really healthy mindset to have. Of, sure, I would miss my patient interactions, I would miss this or I would miss that, but I would be okay. I wouldn't be completely devastated and destroyed and not know what to do with myself. And I think that's a point that we all really need to get to.